Out of all the videos that I've ever done on this channel, I don't think I've ever answered the question, how can we know for sure that God exists? Rather than hoping that there's a man upstairs or a higher power or a creator or whoever you want to call him, like how can we have some tangible proof that we actually do have a God who exists? So in this video, we are going to give you 6 proofs of God's existence coming up. Hey, my friend, welcome back to The Beat. My name is Alan Parr. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time here, it's a pleasure. If you want to know the entire story of the Bible, click the link in the description box below. If you enjoy this video, consider subscribing. Hit that little bell notification so you won't miss a beat. Okay, so if you've ever wondered the question, I can't see God, I can't smell God, but how do I know if he really exists or this whole thing that we see in our universe is just happening by chance? So here are 6 proofs that I want to give you, and 2 of them come from the Bible and the other 4 do not. The first proof is what we'll call an internal witness. Now, this is the idea that deep down inside of every single human being, there is this deep internal sense that there must be a God who exists. I want you to notice here what Paul says about unbelieving Gentiles, not Christians, unbelievers in Romans chapter 1. He says in verse 21, for although they knew God, so let's stop right there. He says that unbelievers, deep down in their spirit, they know God. They know there has to be a God out there somewhere. Now look at verse 25. What do they do with it? They exchanged the truth about God for a lie. So at some point, an unbeliever, they know in their heart there's a God. They may not believe in Jesus. They may struggle with this idea of there being a savior on the cross who died and resurrected and miracles and fed 5,000. I get that. Okay, fine. But deep down inside, even unbelievers have a sense that there is a God, and they exchange that truth for a lie. Now, how would they know that internally and intrinsically? Well, verse 19 says, since what may be known about God is plain to them. Why? Because God has made it plain to them. So basically, Paul is saying, if you just look around, it's very crystal clear that God has done whatever he has needed to do to give every single human being proof of his own existence. He's made it plain. God has made it so plain that the Bible says in Psalm 14:1, a fool says in his heart, there is no God. And so the second proof we'll call the external witness. And this is the idea that not only has God placed it in the heart of every person, deep down intrinsically, that they know that there has to be a God somewhere out there, but now God has left enough proof externally, specifically in nature, to be able to look around, and anyone with any rational thought should be able to come to the conclusion that, oh, okay, well, because I see this, and because this works this way, and because we have enough sunlight and we have enough rainfall, and the fact that these stars aren't falling down on the ground and the moon and the sun are spinning around and the body heals itself whenever we get cut and all these different things, right? God says, I've left enough proof for you to know that I exist. He says once again in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, for since the creation of the world, God's, here it is, invisible qualities, number 1, his eternal power, number 2, and divine nature, number 3, have been what? Clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. God says, listen, when you stand before me one day, I get the fact that you may struggle with understanding who Jesus is and him dying on the cross, but you won't be able to stand before God one day and say, well, God, I just didn't know that you existed, right? He's left enough proof so that man will be without excuse. Okay, so now these next 4 proofs are what we'll call the traditional proofs that people have given over hundreds of years, centuries of years. And the first one we'll look at is what's called the Cosmological Argument. And this word comes from the idea of cosmos, or the universe. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read an excerpt from Wayne Grudem's systematic theology book, which describes it in this way. He says, every known thing in the universe has a cause. Therefore, it reasons the universe itself must also have a cause. And the cause of such a great universe can only be God. Now, let me just kind of break that down in layman's terms. Let's just say we have this phone right here. Well, as we look at this phone had to have a cause of some sort. Something had to cause this phone to be here, right? Or this cup right here, or these glasses right here. Something had to cause this to come into existence. And so if we keep tracing the cause back and say, okay, well, what caused the plastic to be on this set of glasses? Okay, then what caused the plastic to be able to be created, or what caused the resistors in here to be able to be created. And we keep tracing that cause and that cause back to that cause. And who caused that? What caused that? We're basically going to end up with a universe with nothing in it except stars, sun, moon, or whatnot. And then at this point, we have two options. Option one, God caused the universe that we have today. If you get to that conclusion that God is the source and the cause of everything, then you've already gotten to the place that you need to be. Now, the other possibility in terms of how we got our universe is this idea of the Big Bang Theory. But then you're stuck there, because if you go with that route, then you have to come up with some sort of conclusion or explanation, if you will, on what caused the Big Bang. And then you have to come up with the explanation of who was the person who actually caused it, and then who was the person who created the two things or however many things that came together to make the Big Bang. And so if you keep tracing those things back, you'll ultimately get back to there has to be a cause for this, and that cause is God, who we call the uncaused cause. Okay, so the fourth argument is called the teleological argument, and that comes from the word telos, which is from the idea of end or purpose. Now, this argument, basically, I'm going to read back from Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology book, and he says it focuses on the evidence of harmony, order, and design in the universe, and argues that its design gives evidence of an intelligent purpose. So the idea of this is one I love. Basically, the idea is if you look at the universe that we have today, it necessitates that there had to be an intelligent design or designer, that everything that we see didn't just come from happenstance, right? The sun being in a position that it is, it's not just happen. It doesn't just happen to be there. If it was further away, we would freeze up. If it was closer, we would burn up. There is an intelligent design that placed that sun right in the ideal situation. There's an intelligent design that knows just how much rainfall needs to come down on this earth, where if it's too much, we'll drown. If it's not enough, we won't be able to survive. There's an intelligence going on that's sustaining everything. Now let's break it down into simpler terms. Let's once again go back to the cell phone. This cell phone is made of batteries, resistors, capacitors, and who knows what else. Plastic, if you will, whatever. So if I just take a whole bunch of parts from a store, if you will, Radio Shack, I get a whole bunch of parts, batteries, resistors, and I throw them all in this cup, and I just shake them up, right? If I'm not going to be able to take all those parts out and, whoa, pops a cell phone that I can call people all across the world, right? It doesn't work like that, right? So this idea of just throwing things together and causing them to bang together doesn't necessarily result, or will not result, in something that is going to work, right? So the idea is that as we look at our world, as we look at even childbirth, how how babies are born, the miracle of childbirth, and all sorts of other things, there has to be an intelligent designer that is behind all these things that are making it work. Now, the fifth argument is what's called the moral argument. And this is the idea that basically inherent in every single person who has ever existed is this idea of right and wrong. Now, do some people go against their own conscience and do wrong? Of course, we all do. But inherently, let's be honest, we all have a common sense of certain things being right and certain things being wrong. We understand that it is wrong to molest a child. We understand that it is wrong to take the innocent life of somebody. We understand all these things are wrong. Where did that come from? Where did this idea of this is right and no, this is wrong come from? It had to have come from God, because if it didn't come from God, then that means that every single person on earth would have their own separate standard of morality versus there being a general common morality that is shared amongst all human beings, and that could have only come from a morally perfect being, i.e. God. Okay, and the sixth and final proof is a difficult one to wrap your mind around, and it's the ontological argument. And the idea here is, if you can imagine some great maximal being, if you will, right? If you can imagine that being in your mind that can do all these things, that's all powerful, all knowing, that is all sovereign and in control of all things. But if that being only exists in your mind and you're only able to just imagine him, but he doesn't really exist, then that means by default, he can't be the maximum being, i.e. God. There has to be another being out there that is greater than the one that you've actually imagined, because now this being not only exists in your consciousness, but also exists actually in reality as well. And so therefore, there has to be a greater God. Basically the argument is this: if you can imagine that there is a possibility of there being a God, then that means there has to exist the fact that there is a God. Yeah, I know. That's a tough one to wrap your mind around. I get it. Okay, my friends, so there are 6 proofs of God's existence. Can we touch them? Can we feel them? Can we smell them? Not necessarily, but God has left enough proof internally as well as externally of his existence. So if you want to talk about that, let me know in the comment section below, and I would love to hear your thoughts. If you found this video helpful in any way, feel free to share it with a friend. Also, if you haven't done so already, I would love it if you would subscribe. While you're on the channel, check out some of the other videos that are here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on The Beat.